How's it going, everyone? Welcome back to TheBlueShifting and welcome back to Chaoshead, where things went really bad. We had a cool moment where Shogun was pushing us to locate a sword. We actually saw the sword. It appeared in the environment, which is cool because the idea and the concept of reaching for the sword is itself a possibility. It's almost like the idea was that you had to stand in a certain place, have a certain perspective, and you'd be able to see it out of scenery, but you couldn't rationalize it, because if you rationalize it, you'd be like, well, obviously, if a sword is actually there and it's that far away, it'd have to be like 12 stories tall or something. It would be impossible to grab, but you could like conceivably reach out, grab it out of the environment and pull it out. Which is it's a concept that is really fun. I don't see played with a whole lot, but in general, but it's very cool when it is executed, so that's very fun to see. However, Takumi could not bring himself to try hard enough to pull the sword. He was too scared, he was too nervous, he kept rationalizing it away. So despite the fact he was really close to getting it, he didn't quite grab it. And he ignored Shogun, who claimed he was going to kill Nanami if he wasn't listened to. Shogun wasn't actually there. It was like an old toy mask of like Darth Spider, which was a hilarious combination. And at the very end, it made a reveal. It looks like, well, wasn't a reveal actually. Like, I thought it was like a reveal, but at the end, I think it was a delusion. Well, maybe it wasn't. I'm not sure. I don't know how literal it was, but it seemed like Nanami was stranded somewhere, bleeding, still maybe alive, but who knows for how long. And she said, and saying something like her brother was the worst thing that ever happened to her. And I'm now sad and depressed by that. So I'm hoping that was just a delusion. I'm hoping that it's not what actually is happening, but yeah, Shogun doesn't seem to be playing around. So I don't know. I just don't know where this is gonna go. We'll have to see. So yeah, we're starting the brand new chapter. This one's called Psychopath, which yeah, fitting term. So let's see how it goes. And I'll be looking out for that sword more often, I think. I imagine it's going to be appearing more and more in scenes if we're like watching for it. So, yeah. That was fun. I like the idea that they are hiding things inside like the art that are like part of the delusions that are leaking through, which is just, it's a cool concept. Anyway, thank you so much. Let's jump right in. Despite midnight quickly approaching, the ticket gates of the subway Hanzaman line were still filled to the brim with people. The earthquake had violently disrupted the public transportation schedules, and no one was even attempting to hide their frustration as they passed through the ticket gates. Employing a sidelong glance, Ban Yusuji inspected the monitor resting in the station attendant booth. The station staff had received a call yesterday during their morning operations. The caller had reported that a high school girl wielding a gigantic bladed weapon was going on a rampage in the area. The police had been dispatched in response to this, but upon arriving at the scene, they found no trace of the girl, nor the man who had supposedly been attacked. Was that the encounter with Sena at the park? I think so. Ban, who had happened to overhear the story earlier today, was very interested in the appearance of the male victim. The fact that there had been several similar incidents had also caught his attention. This is why Ban was making an appearance here at such an hour. According to his sources, the incident had been captured in full on one of the surveillance cameras. When Ban asked to see the station attendant to show the video to them, they willingly agreed, but warned the detective that the video was a little creepy. Duly noting this, Ban elected to have them show him the video. The video was full of static. Maybe it's from the earthquake, Ban thought to himself. There had been various reports about earthquakes causing citizens to lose hard disk data, leaving Ban to wonder whether it was related. It would be difficult to identify anyone in the recording, as they were just barely visible. The recording featured a single man. He was standing by the wall in the far right-hand corner of the screen. The wall was located slightly far from the ticket gate, meaning passengers would not travel past it very often as they were changing trains. Incidentally, a few other passengers had just crossed in front of the camera. The man's appearance was hard to make out due to the fierce static, but he was fairly short and thin. He was carrying a large rucksack. What exactly he was doing, Ben could not say. After about an hour or so had passed in the video, a small change occurred. A few people commuting to work were walking in the direction of the man, and they then swiftly stopped. To Ben, it looked as if they'd been drawn to the man with the rucksack. What was truly strange, however, was that they did not even speak to him. They simply stood there in a daze. The people who had stopped did not seem to be acquaintances of the man. They were of different ages, sexes, statures. There was absolutely nothing that they shared. What in blazes is going on? Yeah, it's one of those weird, like, mind, like, affecting devices like we saw in the park. So this is a different incident, but it's likely playing out in the very similar scenario. Sena's probably going to come in and try and stop Nozomi from doing whatever they're doing. Staring at the monitor, Ban tilted his head to the side, and as he did so, a lone girl entered the frame. She had long hair. She was wearing a uniform from Suimei Academy. The girls headed straight for the man on the rucksack and the manager that could only be described as exuding nothing but pure, unadulterated confidence. Her movements were entirely unlike those who had stopped before. Instead of halting, the girl pushed aside the people gathered there and seized the man by his collar. For a short period of time, the two of them argued about something. Rather than an argument, however, it was far closer to the girl simply screaming at the man without giving him room for air, or at least that's how it appeared. A few of the people who had stopped seemed to return to their senses and promptly left the scene. Eventually, the girl thrust the man away from her. The girl took a step back from the man who had fallen on his rear and assumed a strange pose. She lowered her hips, brought both fists next to her ears. The girl looked as if she was holding something, but there was nothing in her hands. According to the report, the girl had been wielding a large blade, but where on earth could she be hiding such a thing? The answer to that soon became apparent. Suddenly, the screen of the camera shook. It was not static. The rustling hair and clothes of the passers-by made it clear the surveillance camera itself was shaking. There she is. Ben gawked at the screen. He had no idea where she'd retrieved it from, but the next thing he knew, the girl was holding a gigantic sword in her hand, one that was longer than she was tall. Van asked for the tape to be rewound just so he could confirm what he had seen. But no matter what angle he examined it from, the sword appeared to have been conjured from thin air. The girl had not moved a single muscle. She'd remained in her hunched position the entire time. This much was undeniable. Could you imagine actually seeing that on the camera? It's like, what the? You'd be like, because it's the concept is this, which I think is something that gets underestimated in media. Like, it's always depicted, and I think it's because it's realistic, despite how frustrating it can be for us when we're watching a show or a game like this, where we're like, okay, we understand the fundamentals that are going on here. We know that there's something supernatural kind of happening, there's some kind of magic involved, some kind of abilities, like all of that, right? We have a little bit of context, even if we don't know how it all works. So for us, we've gotten to the point now where we're used to this idea of pulling these swords out from other dimensions. Like, we understand that concept as a reader. But if it were in real life, even if it was a story we'd heard before that was like similar to what we were seeing, let alone something completely alien that had never been like conceived or told in any type of story in any format, or like that's reasonably similar, and you actually watched this on footage, wouldn't you also assume it was doctored? Wouldn't you also assume that it was fake? Especially because people have been faking videos for decades now. Like, and it's only getting easier and easier to do. I mean, look at AI alone, but not even that, like, just look at the capabilities of editing and Photoshop, CGI, all of that. So if you were actually watching, like, you know, CTV footage, and you saw this, and you really saw footage like this, and like, who wouldn't immediately question what you'd seen? Who immediately wouldn't assume that it was some kind of trick or some kind of like gag? Why would anyone take it seriously initially, except for the fact that like there are people who witnessed it, who like report seeing it? And that's the other thing too that's interesting. Up until now, I felt like people couldn't see these swords most of the time. So now I wonder if something changed when the earthquake and explosion happened, and I wonder if the swords are going to become perceptible by more people, because maybe more people are more open to delusions, and so now it's going to become like a lot more attention grabbing. Like, or the other thing about that too is that can cameras always see the swords but people can't? Because that also indicates this idea that like they're real, but something is preventing us from perceiving certain things. And again, it kind of hurls me back to that concept. One of my favorite concepts in all Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy books, like that whole series. I can't remember what they call the whole set, but I think it was book 2 or book 3, which is Restaurant at the End of the Universe. They have this whole concept of a ship that can travel through space and time, and it uses a complex algorithm that is depicted as a diner setting where they have robots that are parts of this computer who simulate a diner that uses the diner to make the calculations in relativity to be able to transport the ship from one location to another in space and time. Very, very cool concept. But the other part of it that's really funny is that they contact the alien who owns the spaceship outside of a football stadium. And it's parked, like a spaceship is parked in the parking lot, taking up several parking spaces and everything. Like, it's huge. And nobody notices it. And I think, what's the main character's name? Arthur? He kind of talks about that. He's like, why is nobody saying anything? And the doctor is like, oh, that's because of somebody else's problem field. I think he has like an acronym for it, but that's the whole, like it's a defense mechanism, it's a cloak. It's like, it doesn't actually make the ship invisible. It simply makes it so that as soon as people start to recognize in their mind that it's odd or different, it immediately plants the idea in their head that this is somebody else's problem. And they immediately move on, and their thoughts just don't attach to it. So, do they see it? Yes. Do they acknowledge it? No, because it's somebody else's problem. And that's what I think a lot of these delusions turn out to be, we also have an indication that it tends to alter perception in a sense of like the flower bed. It wasn't there, but then everyone felt like it had always been there without question. So there's some manipulation there. But I also think it's also this kind of concept of the brain is just being shortcutted to make assumptions for some reason. Anyway, let's go. The people in the video went into a panic when faced with the sudden appearance of a sword, but the girl did not seem to care about the people around her. The man with the rucksack, however, was very clearly terrified. He tried desperately to scramble to his feet and run away. But the girl would not allow that. With incredibly agile movements, she pursued the fleeing man and swung her gigantic sword as if it was as light as a feather. In a manner akin to a violent windstorm, the sword tore the man's rucksack to pieces. The impact was so strong, the man immediately collapsed to the ground. Despite this, he appeared uninjured. In fact, when the police officer had arrived at the scene immediately after receiving the call, they had not even found a single trace of blood. I don't know, best girl? She's definitely winning in that category for me. Then, as if the girl had heard Ban's muttering, something that should have been impossible considering it was a recording, she suddenly turned toward the camera. The screen ever so slightly distorted. Oh. And the girl's figure disappeared in an instant. It was as if she'd never been there to begin with. The man's shredded rucksack had been left behind, and the remnants of it were proof that the girl had been there. It was hard to tell because of the static, but it was clear that the girl had disappeared from the screen in less than a second. Ban rewound the tape again. There was nothing that seemed unnatural about the time displayed in the lower right-hand corner of the screen. In other words, the footage had not been edited. But if that were true, how could Ban explain the girl and the sword? Ban, feeling as though he'd seen a ghost, could do nothing more than remain completely and utterly puzzled. So I wonder, can she alter her perception to technology? Maybe that's all she did, is that she just utilized the same power that lets people see or not see things to work on the camera. I don't know. In a world of complete and utter white, and I was lying right in the center of it all. I felt as if I were floating, but I didn't know whether or not I actually was. I couldn't figure out what direction I was facing, nor up, nor down, nor left, nor right. The silence was deafening. It felt as if there were hundreds of insects buzzing around my head at once. If someone were to tell me that this was the afterlife, I couldn't see myself contesting it. That was how monotonous, simplistic, tranquil, orderly, immaculate, empty, and peaceful the world was. Perhaps this was what the mind of Buddha was like upon reaching enlightenment. It was so incredibly different from my own mind. I wanted to stay here forever. The irritation that came with reality, the loneliness, the pain, the suffering, I didn't want to face any of it anymore. As my thoughts began to cascade, I heard a noise burst into the white world that had previously been silent. The sound of a door being opened and the sound of someone's footsteps getting closer and closer. Oni! Kita yo!
兄お兄、今日ね、ナナね、いいもの持ってきたんだよ。はい、これ、プレゼント。手編みの帽子なんだよ。すごいでしょ？すごいでし
Gosh darn it.
ょ？もう冬だしね。ナナね、帽子好きだから、編んだの。使ってね。お兄、無視しないでよ。あー、ご飯残してるじゃん。せっかくのカレーなのに。ちゃんと食べないとダメなんだよ。ねえねえ、病院のご飯って美味しくないって本当？
Hospital food.
でも食べないとダメ。起きろ、お兄。食べずに寝たら夜になってお腹空いちゃうんだから。
Is this when we were in the hospital, like when we were younger, right? Someone's hand made its way under my back and forcibly shook my body awake. That was when I first realized that my eyes had been closed. Aww. When I opened my eyes, a little girl was standing there. It was Nanami, my little sister. But she was awfully little. It was Nanami from a long time ago. But how long ago, I wondered. She must have been at least in elementary school. Aww. The younger Nanami scooped up some curry with a plastic spoon and he offered it to me. And I slapped the hand holding the spoon. Even after all this time, I still didn't know what had been going through my head, but in that moment I'd knocked away the tray of curry and rice with my hand and sent it crashing to the floor. Aww.
お兄、お行儀悪いんだ。お母さんに言いつけてやるぞ。
Aww. Nanami crouched down on the floor and picked up the tray I'd cast aside. She then retrieved the washcloth from the sink in the corner of the room and began cleaning up the mess I'd made.
ほんと、世話が焼けるな。ナナがいないと、なんにもできないんだから。
That's enough. I covered my face with my hands and slowly closed my eyes.
ごめんね。あなたを守ってあげられなくて。
It sounds like the older her. I slowly opened my eyes and saw a white ceiling. It was so bright it nearly blinded me. I blinked my eyes a few times. I tried to move my fingertips, raise my hand from my face. The palm of my hand created a shadow. At last I was free from the blinding glare. I had been dreaming about Nanami. Ever since I could remember, she'd been especially strong-willed. She'd had an especially strong will. After the bus accident back in elementary school, I'd stopped talking to anyone and everyone, but even so, that part of Nanami only became stronger and stronger. Unlike my parents, who were simply overprotective and nothing else, she'd taken care of me while remaining strict and firm. But that dream... Had I ever been hospitalized before? Gone in for checkups, sure, but well, it was just a dream, so there's no real reason to take it nor the contradiction seriously. 'Cause that is a little weird. I was lying on a bed. It was a white bed with pipe frame. The sheets were white, the pillows were white, the linoleum floor was white, the wallpaper was white, the fluorescent lights on the ceiling were white, the curtains covering the windows were white. Oh, that sounds awful, actually. The small shelf next to the bed was white, the ceramic pitcher of water was white, the paper cups were white. I was starting to get fed up with all the white. Muttering up my resolve, I attempted to sit up. For a split second, I felt a numbing pain jolt through the area around my waist, but it went away just as suddenly as it appeared. The room was fairly large, at least twice the size of my base, but what really bothered me is how incredibly dreary it was. Maybe it was a hospital room. There was a pair of green slippers lying right beneath the bed. I was relieved to find a color other than white. My body was moving just fine. Didn't seem like I was dead either. I was thirsty and wanted a cola, an ice-cold carbonated cola. But there was no way I'd be able to find something like that in this pure white room, so I was forced to pour water directly from the pitcher into my mouth. It was a bit lukewarm, but it was enough to satisfy my thirst. Hey, it's her again. Upon finishing the water, I took a breath. The door then opened, and a nurse wearing a scrubs came into the room. That was enough for me to confirm that this was a hospital after all. Upon seeing me, her eyes grew slightly wide. She must have thought I would still be asleep.
あら、西條さん、目が覚めたんですね。
Facing me, she gave me a gentle smile, the mark of a true nurse. But something told me I'd seen this person before. Oh, I remembered her now. She was the grill who had... I keep wanting to read it as girl. The grill who had been at the hospital when I'd gone to see Dr. Takashina a while back. What did she say her name was? Couldn't remember, so I stole a glance at the name tag on her chest. Hazuki was written on it. Right, Hazuki-san.
お体の調子はどうですか?
Hazuki held out a thermometer to me, so naturally I couldn't help but take it.
体温を測ってくださいね.
With how nicely she'd asked me, I had no choice but to comply. My head was overrun with question marks, but I put the thermometer under my armpit nonetheless. Immediately after I did so, a memory burst to life inside my head. I remembered what had happened. Right, we'd been here. Back then, I'd given up on saving Nanami and grabbed onto Shogun's wheelchair, but there had been no response. It collapsed into a heap, and when I'd looked again, all I'd been holding was Darth Spider's helmet. Count Darth Spider. The Count Darth Spider? Oh my gosh, how many... Yeah, like, Count? Like, the very embodiment of evil in Spark Wars. His black-clad appearance was famous even in Japan. But I would have never thought that Shogun would cosplay as him, so my anger had been overwritten by raw confusion. After that, I'd stood up, looked at the wheelchair, but there'd been no one in it. Only a black hood draped over the back of it. That was another part of Darth Spider's costume. Then I examined my surroundings one more time, but there'd been no one there. I'd been the only one on that top, pitch black rooftop. Suddenly, the press came flooding in all at once. They had surrounded me with lights, cameras, and microphones. I'd had no room to breathe. There'd been more than 10 of them in total. I'd been so overwhelmed by it all, my terror simply grew and grew, and I'd want to run away, but I couldn't move a muscle. It'd been a total mess.
Nishijo-kun! 投資はどうなっちゃったのかな?
結局ニュージェネの犯人は誰なのかわからないということですか?
そのダーススパイダーのヘルメットは何か超能力と関係あるのかな?
西条さん、答えてくれませんか? これで終わりなんて言うなら電波ジャックですよ。
結局何がしたかったんです? ニュージェネに便乗した売名行為ですか? 不謹慎だと思わないんですか?
I feel so bad for him, but they're thrilled. They love it.
ユーリ・ブライトマンさんとは最近話したかな? どんなこと話した?
地震とニュージェネについて何か関係あると思いますか?
その手に持っている美少女フィギュアは何らかの儀式的なアイテムと考えていいんですか?
A totem for a ritual. Oh my gosh.
このような行動を取ったことにはアニメやゲームの影響はあったのかな?
西条さん!
西条さん?
西条君!
The lightning pointed at me had been incredibly hot. I felt as if my skin was being singed by the sun during the hottest part of the summer. The flood of people in the media made me feel lightheaded. My field of vision had been spinning around in circles. I'd been cornered. I'd been panicking. I'd been unable to breathe. I'd grasped my head. I can't see anything. I don't want to see anything. I can't hear anything. I don't want to hear anything. I can't feel anything. I don't want to feel anything.
やめてくれ!
At the very same moment, I'd screamed like a computer that had short-circuited. My consciousness had severed. So he deluded himself into a coma, essentially. That was exactly what had happened. I'd lost consciousness. And then, how had I ended up at the hospital? I couldn't remember. At the very least, I didn't think I'd come on my own, so maybe I'd been brought to the hospital by an ambulance? Hazuki-san was writing something on the clipboard she was holding. She must have had to slip a paperclip to it. What was she writing about my condition? I checked what time it was via the simplistic watch wrapped around her wrist. It was a little after 6 a.m. I slept for a really long time. Alright. Regardless, why had I been brought here? If Hazuki-san was here, then that meant this was my normal hospital. I don't know why. We haven't done a negative one in a while. Let's try a negative one. It wasn't like me being brought to the general hospital was particularly... Oh wait, although... we could have a positive one about Hazuki. Tempting. Let's do a negative one. Something still didn't feel right. Why was Hazuki-san coming to check on me? That question really bothered me. I mean, Hazuki-san was a psychiatric nurse. If Hazuki-san was coming to check on me, didn't that mean the room I was in was also used by psychiatric patients? Oh, he's probably in the psych ward, which means he actually might be pseudo-arrested, technically.
警察の人が後でお話を聞きたいそうですよ。
Yeah. Hazuki's gentle tone turned cold. Without looking at me, she continued writing something on the piece of paper attached to the clipboard.
妹さんを殺すなんて、ひどい人ですね。
What had she just said?
あなたの家で見つかったそうですよ。死体。
What?
妹さんの手首を切り落として持ち歩いていたなんて、まともじゃないわ。
僕は殺してない。
そう主張しているらしいですね。意味不明なことばかり言ってて話にならないって、刑事さんがぼやいてました。心神喪失で無罪っていうのを狙ってるんですか?
Insanity. Yeah. A state in which a person loses the ability to distinguish between right and wrong due to some form of mental disorder. According to paragraph 1 of Article 39 of the Japanese Penal Code, an act of insanity is not punishable, resulting in cases in which criminals are acquitted without being held legally responsible for their actions. That happens in America too, but it also, you don't get freedom. Like, sometimes media makes it sound like you plead for some insanity, you just get let go. And no, you don't get criminally charged, but you get institutionalized. You don't go free. You go to a psych center.
でもみんな思ってますよ。あなたが殺したんだって。
My chest squeezed tightly and I began to hallucinate that everything before my eyes had gone completely black. I was starting to doubt myself. Had I killed Nanami? No, that couldn't be true.
この人殺し。
She had been writing something, but suddenly Hazuki's hand stopped. She then slowly turned the clipboard toward me. Whose eyes are those eyes? Oh man, he does sound sane. Suddenly, I realized I was sitting in the same bed in the same hospital room. I wasn't sure why the sheet I just ripped off me was still on me. Hazuki-san, who had been standing right beside the bed, had disappeared before I could even blink. Wiping the greasy sweat off my forehead, I looked around the hospital room once again. After a couple knocks, Hazuki-san entered the room and her eyes widened slightly upon seeing me.
あら。西條さん、目が覚めたんですね。
Wait, did that whole sequence not happen? What? A gentle smile accompanied her as she said that. I stiffened up and then looked away.
お体の調子はどうですか?
Hazuki-san held out a thermometer to me so naturally I couldn't help but take it.
体温を測ってくださいね。
As I took the thermometer from her, I gulped. It's the same. The exact thing from before was repeating, as if it was Hazuki had just walked into the hospital room for the first time. I nervously reached for the thermometer in the underarm. I was sure I'd put the thermometer there just a minute ago, and yet there was nothing there. The thermometer had disappeared, which meant that what I'd seen earlier really had been a delusion. The tension in my body disappeared, but that didn't mean that my state of mind was any better, nor that I felt anywhere close to relieved.
昨日ご家族がお見えになっていたんですけど、西條さんの意識が戻らないので、日付が変わる頃にお帰りになりました。今日は診察時間が始まる頃にお母様が来るそうですよ。
I nodded in response, not having energy to say anything back. Mom, I'm sorry for being such a disgrace. I'm an embarrassment to Japan, no, to the entire world. The entire thing had been televised, meaning it had already spread to the entire country. I was sure my shameful behavior had been uploaded to YouTube as well. I think it's hilarious that it's called YouTube, because that has a whole different meaning now. Is that intentional? Like, has mewing been a thing longer than I thought? I didn't think so, but if it's not, that's an awful coincidence. Kind of like how, like, ESO Online is an actual game, even though in this it wasn't at the time. That's crazy. I had no idea why I'd been made into the amazing Esper boy, and it didn't make any sense to broadcast my every move, and on a day of a huge earthquake, no less. When I was nothing more than a boring otaku freak. It wasn't normal. Because of that, I couldn't help but think that everyone from back then was being mind-controlled by Shogun. But regardless of whether or not that were true, I still publicly humiliated myself. It wasn't something I'd escape after enduring a quick crap storm online that'd be forgotten in about a week. Was this it for me? Would I no longer be able to live in peace? Suddenly, Nanami's face appeared in the back of my mind. It bit down on my lip and hugged my knees. Even if that were no longer attainable, as long as I could save Nanami, none of it would matter. Even if people from all over the world snickered at me and called me pathetic loser the rest of my life, it would make no difference to me. But I couldn't save her. I couldn't even do that much.
Nana.
Tears began to fall from my eyes.
どうしました？どこか痛みます？
Shaking my head over and over, I kept on crying. Nanami was dead. Nanami was dead. She's never coming back. It was my fault. All my fault. All my fault. All my fault. Because of how worthless I was, because of how much a fucking loser I was, Nanami was dead. The sword. Back on the rooftop, I'd given up so easily on untaming the D-sword. I'd Sierra-tan's seductive words in my ear, but that was just my pathetic self pretending to be someone else. I was the one who'd made the decision. I'd made myself look like a pitiful victim. I'd chosen to sacrifice Nanami so I would survive. I hated myself. How pathetic I was. If only I'd tried just a little bit harder. I told myself that I'd given up on my own volition, but now that it was all over, I regretted every single thing I'd done on that rooftop. I was absolutely disgusted with myself. She was gone, nothing could save her now, and yet, even still, I couldn't help but think that if I could just go back to that rooftop, I could just try it a little bit harder. But I knew that even if I actually could go back, I'd never give up all over. I'd have given up all over again, finding some other excuse to get me out of it. That was just who I was. A complete, useless, irredeemable piece of crap. This music's really sad.
Nanami. ごめん。Nanami.
Hazuki-san rubbed my back in an attempt to comfort me. I was useless as a sack of crap at the very end. I was even causing problems for the nurses that had nothing to do with me. The tears refused to stop.
何か後悔していることがあるんですね。でもきっと妹さんも許してくれますよ。
Huh? How does she know that Nanami is my sister? Even that aside, the formulaic consolation she's giving me was the last thing I needed right now. I'm sorry, Hazuki, but no one else can understand how I feel. Was I right? Was it all fake? That would be amazing. Please let that be true. I hated myself. I was pathetic. I did nothing but take advantage of everyone else and only ever thought about myself. The world would be better off without me. Maybe I should just end it all.
昨日もしきりに西條さんのことを心配していましたよ。
Yeah. Oh my gosh.
とても可愛らしい妹さんですね。
What was she talking about?
Nanami は妹は死にました。
She had been kidnapped by Shogun. She had her hand cut off. She'd been in prison somewhere. And then in the end, she died all alone and afraid. When I imagined it, I felt like my heart was being torn in dozens of tiny pieces.
そうなんですか。ごめんなさい。勘違いしてしまって。
All my life, I'd thought that Nanami was annoying, although we had been siblings for 16 years. Even though she'd called me a jerk more times than I could count, she was always worried about me. The reason why she'd always nagged me so much was because she'd been trying to help me break free from my toxic lifestyle. Whenever she'd brought me food from our parents' house, she didn't just give it to me and leave, she'd always tried to share it with me. Normally, if a girl at her age had an otaku freak of a brother, they'd never associate with him. And while the things she didn't make her the easiest person to be around, she still talked to me. She would listen too. Whenever I'd been at school, she never avoided me. No, she would actually approach me. No matter what, Nanami had always treated me, a vile otaku freak virgin, like her brother. Like a human being. Her mere existence had helped me more than I ever knew, but realizing that did me no good now was too late.
でも、だとしたら、鬼ってどういう意味なのかしら。
Huh? Yeah. Oh. Ah, yes. Whew. I looked up, unable to properly comprehend what I'd just heard, and my eyes were blurry with tears. I couldn't see Hazuki's face properly. What had she just said?
眠ってる西條さんを、鬼と何度も呼んでいたから、その印象が強くて。
There was only one person who called me that.
それ、本当ですか？
Vaulting out of my bed, I pressed Hazuki-san for answers.
はい。何がです？
ななみが、妹がななみがここに来てたんですか？
いえ、はっきりお名前を聞いたわけでは。
僕のこと鬼って呼んでたんですね。
ええ。
ななみは今どこに？
ですから、昨日はお帰りになりましたけど、西条さんのお母様と一緒に。
怪我とかしてませんでしたか？
はい。いえ、特には。
Okay, so it was all fake.
元気だったんですね。ななみは元気だったんですね。
はい。いえ、ななみさんかどうかはわかりませんけど、昨日いらしていた女の子は元気そうでしたよ。
Nanami was alive. From everything Hazuki had said, it had been true. I sat down on the bed, utterly dazed. But how? Shogun had said that he wouldn't give Nanami back to me until I completed his quest. Had he just released her out of pity? Or had Nanami escaped on her own? But then, how would that explain the hand that had been sent to me? According to Hazuki-san, Nanami hadn't even been injured. Like I said,
もしかしたら君の家に送ったあの手首は別人のものかもしれないよ。
oh, I guess that could have been somebody else's, true. But I still think it's the whole, like, we have entire devices that change the way you perceive the world. That seems like a more possible explanation at this point. What had he said? It hadn't been a lie. He'd played me. I'd been dancing right to his tune. Shogun had deceived me. No, that didn't matter right now.
そっか。
I see. So that was it. It all was coming together. Nanami had never been kidnapped at all. Back when I'd been at O Front trying desperately to grab the D sword, Nanami must have been relaxing back at home, reading manga or going out to karaoke with her friends, and she could show off her crappy singing voice, or doing whatever else she liked to do. Aww. He's so happy. I was crying, but I couldn't help but laugh.
西条さん？
将軍にまんまと騙された。なんという壮大な釣りだよ。
She was alive. Nanami was alive. I could see that bratty face of hers again. I could hear that obnoxious, shrill voice of hers again. The mere thought was enough to bring me a deep sense of relief and an intense joy that rose from the bottom of my heart.
よかった。
I couldn't stop crying, but the tears weren't the tears of regret I'd been crying earlier.
よかった。
I was an utterly useless pile of crap, but I couldn't help it. The day before, I'd given up without being able to do anything. But even so, as long as Nanami was alive, I didn't wish for anything else. The whole world could mock me until the end of time for all I cared. I was overjoyed. Thank goodness, she was safe. Yeah. Oh, good. That does make us wonder, though. Was the hand real? Gotta know. Yet another meeting had been called in the main conference room in Shibuya Police Department, joining the multiple others that had been held today. The exhausted, fed-up detectives all wondered how many more hours worth of unproductive meetings they would be forced to sit through. Matsunaga was about to start hearing the reports from each investigator when suddenly Ban hesitantly stood up and raised his hand.
ちょっといいですかね。
なんだね。
Inquisitive eyes and expressions landed on Ban not just from Matsunaga, but from Suwa, the detective sitting next to him as well. Ban smiled his usual flippant smile, quickly bowed his head, then looked around the room.
先日インターネット上に投稿されたいわゆる集団ダイブの映像についてなんですが、実はちょっとした発見をしまして。
Okay.
え？
The surprise on Suwa's face was evident. In all likelihood, he was surprised. After all, Ban had examined the video without saying a word to him. It was not because he hadn't wanted to keep a secret from him, however, no.
バン警部補、君は確か貼り付けの捜査担当だったはずだが、なぜ集団ダイブについて調べている？
This was the reason. Ban had discharged the orders to had been given, had disregarded the orders he'd been given by his boss, the head of the investigation team. If Ban had involved Suwa, a promising new detective, his partner would have inevitably been harshly rebuked by their boss. Ban wanted to avoid this.
まあとりあえず見てくださいって。
With a chuckle, Ban took out 2 enlarged photos from the file he'd held in his hand and attached them to the blackboard with magnets.
これはどっちも集団ダイブの現場となったコーネリアスタワー屋上の写真です。
So why is there a building in one and it's not in the other? What?
右の写真は例のミュウツベ投稿映像から抜き出したもの。左のは昨日の夜私がタワー屋上に行って撮ってきたものになります。
So, how is that possible? That would imply that the video was taken before that building was constructed, or in a world where that building never existed.
何か違いに気づきませんか？
The entire conference room began to stir.
背景がね、違うんです。投稿映像のカメラは北東へ向かってる。5人が転落したのが北東だったから間違いない。で、映像では3分29秒から約15秒間、カメラが左右へ大きく触れるんですが、その時に東に向いた時の映像がこの右側の写真なわけです。コーネリアスタワーの東、つまり六本木方面ですね。東京タワーが夜景の中にしっかり映ってる。高いから目立ちますね。でもね、もう一つよく目立つものが映ってないんですよ。
Yeah, what's this all about? Ban's eyes narrowed as he combed his beard to his fingertips, then a wry smile appeared on his lips.
六本木ビルズですよ。
It was true, the lights of the Roppongi bills could not be seen in the photo that had been taken from the uploaded video. But the photo Ban had taken from the day prior, the lights of the Roppongi bills' many windows were very clearly visible along with Tokyo Tower.
で、たまたま見つけたんですが、コーネリアスタワーのホテルロビーにタワー完成当時のパネルが展示してありましてね。
Huh.
そのパネルの一つがこれ。
Ban retrieved a new photo from the file and pinned it next to the previous two. It was also a picture of the Roppongi area taken from the rooftop of the tower, but it was not a picture taken at night, it was one taken at day.
六本木ビルズが映ってますよね。建設中ですが。
The commotion in the conference room grew even louder. Matsunaga, meanwhile, remained silent as he stared at the photo with a stern expression.
コーネリアスタワーの完成は2001年。六本木ビルズの完成は2003年。
Right.
タワー完成当時の写真では当然ながら六本木ビルズは建設中でまだ高さもほとんどない。だが集団ダイブが起きたのは今年2008年だ。
Yeah.
映ってなきゃおかしいですよね。六本木ビルズ。
That's really weird.
ちなみに投稿映像に細工された形跡はなかった。
つまり何が言いたいんだ？
Yeah, that's the thing. I'm more confused than anything. What the heck? Having seemingly lost patience with the detective, Matsunaga urged him onward discontentedly.
非常に言いにくいんですが。
まさか先輩、この映像が撮られたのは2003年以前、つまり5年以上前って言いたいんですか？
Yeah, but then if that happened 5 years ago, why did the people drop from the rooftops recently? Like, how's that work? Dang it, Suwa. Ban's shoulders slumped dejectedly. The young detective's keen insight was brilliant. Suwa had said exactly what Ban had intended to say. However, having said it aloud in such a straightforward manner only made the claim appear all the more dubious. Ban's careful planning on how to articulate his points had been all for nothing.
バカバカしい。小説の読みすぎではないがね。映像に映っている被害者5人の顔は一致しているんだ。 あれが5年前のもののはずがない。そんなつまらないことを調べている暇があったら聞き込みの一つでもしたらどうだ、警部補。
ああ。
今のは聞かなかったことにする。それと後で話があるから会議が終わったら残りたまえ。
Dang it. That sucks. After letting out a short sigh, Ban gave up and sat back down. Well, it's not like I expected him to believe me. Bitter and unwilling to accept defeat, Ban muttered that inside his head before returning to listlessly fanning his face with his handheld fan. And yet, despite all the work he'd done, if one were to ask what the absence of Roppongi bills in the video signified, Ban would be unable to answer. Yeah, that's so strange. Very strange. After I'd found out that Nanami was alive, the doctor came to me and asked me a few simple questions. They wanted to make sure whether or not I was well enough to leave. I answered the questions to the best of my ability, then opted to leave the hospital before my mom came back. After that disgraceful behavior I'd shown off in front of the entire country, how was I supposed to face my family now? And if Nanami were to come back, I knew I'd be so happy I'd immediately burst into tears all over again. And then, since she wouldn't know why I was crying, Nanami would take it seriously and start yelling at me not to worry about her, probably while calling me an idiot too. When I thought about that, I nearly fainted from the sheer embarrassment. So instead of letting it happen, I decided to employ a strategic retreat. Come on, man. You know you love him. You gotta have that room. A nurse brought me the most disgusting breakfast of all time, and after chirping away at it slightly, I snuck out of the hospital room. I made my way down to the first floor and then into the lobby. The clinic hadn't opened yet, so the lobby that was usually packed with old people is completely deserted. I confidently walked toward the front entrance. Luckily for me, the automatic door opened, giving me free rein to exit the building. The hospital staff might have gotten angry with me for leaving without asking them first, but I had to stay away from the hospital until everything calmed down. For the medical fees, I left my mom a note telling her to go ahead and pay for it, so that should be fine. Despite the fact that I had stayed overnight in the hospital, I wasn't exhibiting any actual symptoms. My mental state was doing much better after I had learned that Nanami was alive. Making sure to keep an eye out for any ambushes by Shogun or Yua, I quickly made my way back to my base. So is that hand real? That's what I need to know. I'd made it back. My mental state had done a complete 180 since I'd last been at my base. Of course, I was feeling a lot better now, if only I could have let my past self know that. You let yourself get baited far too often, mate. I rate 8 out of 8 level lethal. I'm not sure what that one is. Mine. There's a reason for you to get so riled up, dude. Nanami's fine, lol, foohee times 100. Or something along those lines. Thinking back on it, yesterday really had been a living hell. Everything had just gone to crap. I'd gotten a weird phone call in the morning, then there'd been the earthquake. Then the data on my hard drive had disappeared, then I'd witnessed the ISA try to off herself right in front of me. Then I'd gotten an email from Shogun, then he sent me a severed hand. A severed gosh darn hand. My mood plummeted in an instant. With a gulp, I turned my attention to the fridge. You didn't keep it in the fridge, did you? That's where the hand is. Before I'd left it yesterday, I decided in my maniacal state to just put the hand in the fridge for the time being. If I'd left it out somewhere, it could have started rotting. The smell of blood was also way too strong for me. There was all sorts of sci-fi animated movies where as long as they remained frozen, people could stay in a state of suspended animation for hundreds of years. So that was pretty much what I was going for. I thought that if I could keep Nanami's arm fresh, they might have been able to get it surgically reconnected once she was back home safe. But if that wasn't Nanami's hand, then who the heck would it belong to? And how would they explain the cell phone at Bengal? If I wasn't missing something, then it had belonged to Nanami. When I called her, it had rung on a cell phone held in the hand. Or maybe it had been all just part of Shogun's trap? Was it even possible to make such a perfect replica of Nanami's arm? I'm glad he's getting to this, because I was worried he was going to faff around for a while. In truth, I really didn't want to. The entire hand thing grossed me out. Just thinking about it made me want to puke, even if it did belong to Nanami. But that doesn't mean it didn't keep it in my fridge forever. Not even a supply of cola could stay that cold in it. I considered asking the police to come take it, but then I realized that they'd just suspect me of being the NewGen culprit, even more than they already did, that is. It would practically be suicide to dial 110 and go, hello, yes, please come take this person's severed hand from my hands, thank you. But what should I do? Should I just throw it away? But supposing it was Nanami's arm, that really didn't sound like a good idea to throw it away. Heck, were you even allowed to throw away human hands like that? Did they constitute a burnable and non-burnable trash? Actually, yeah, if the laws in Japan are similar to America's, disposing of body parts is illegal. Because the assumption being that it's either part of an investigation, should be part of an investigation, or is considered biohazards at the very least and could be toxic to people. So yeah, no, if you for some reason had access to human body parts, you do not do anything with them. You throw them, you call the police because you'll get in trouble. I tore out my hair. There was no point continuing to torture myself over it. I'd just go ahead and check one more time that the bangle was on her wrist and then that she was holding a cell phone. Was it Nanami's or was it someone else's? That was the question I hoped to answer. I stood in front of the refrigerator and gripped the handle, closed my eyes, and then took 1, 2, 3 deep breaths. Now, surprisingly, the temptation to just call Rimi and ask her to do it for me crept into my mind, but I quickly shooed it away. No matter how good of an ally Rimi was to me, there was no way she'd freak out. She wouldn't freak out upon finding someone's hand in my fridge, and then if I managed to fetch up the explanation, she'd fall out of love with me and turn me into the police. I like how he already assumes that she's in love with him. I mean, there's some indication that that might be true, but like, it's a bold step to take, sir. I was gonna have to do this on my own somehow. I clenched my teeth, took 2 more deep breaths, and then I yanked on the handle with all my might. Yeah, what? It was empty, entirely empty. I thought for sure I'd put the hand in there yesterday. It'd been wrapped in aluminum foil. It should have been on the top shelf. And yet, there was no sign of it. All that was there was a few bottles of cola and a bunch of rotten clementines, nothing else. Just like that, it was completely gone. I crouched down and looked further into the refrigerator, but of course, it still wasn't there. There wasn't much in there to begin with, so it was already practically empty. There was no way I could have missed it. Or maybe I just assumed that, and in reality, I'd left it somewhere. I closed the fridge door and looked around the trash-filled room. The large cardboard box with the hand inside of it? What had I done with it? It felt like I'd tossed it into the corner of my room or something, but either way, my memory of last night was very unclear. More things had happened yesterday than my poor brain could handle, and everything was made all the more brutal due to the utter chaos of it all. Calm down. Just calm down. Now get your thoughts together. Think of why it might have disappeared. Could yesterday have all been a delusion? Like, it's kind of starting to feel like that. What is happening? Alright, boot up my word processor on my PC and wrote down all the possibilities I could think of. 1, my mistake, put it somewhere else in my room. 2, I myself took it out yesterday and threw it away somewhere. 3, Shogun took it back. That's horrifying. 4, the police searched my house and confiscated it. Also kind of horrifying. 5, the mass media broke in and stole it. Unlikely, but even scarier. And 6, the hand never existed in the first place. That's starting to feel like the real one, and that's terrifying too. My base had been unlocked ever since yesterday, so if someone really wanted to, they could have come right in and taken it without much trouble. That would also be consistent with how the Shogun had been able to put that hand in my room in the first place. Or maybe it was number 2. My memory of when I'd left my base to go to O-Front was unclear. The feeling that I had saved Nanami, seeing the severed hand, how terrified I was with Shogun, all these emotions swirled around me, invading each and every corner of my mind. I couldn't calm down at all. Maybe I just left my base and tossed the hand in a dumpster somewhere without knowing it? Or maybe the whole hand thing in general had been just a delusion, didn't actually exist at all. But when I went to check my email, I found that the one I'd gotten from Shogun yesterday did in fact exist, and in that email he clearly stated the hand was a present. Not to mention that Shogun himself had talked about it yesterday. I just couldn't believe it had been just a delusion. Okay then, what about the possibility that the police or the media took it? Those people looked like otaku freaks, like they were no better than crap smeared on the bottom of their shoe, so it wouldn't surprise me. After everything that had happened yesterday, I was afraid to look at the internet, and yet at the end I couldn't help myself, so I clicked open my browser. First, I checked the news stations on Taboo, as well as the news sites I typically go to. Oh boy. And sure enough, there were articles upon articles of uproar yesterday at the Scramble Crossing. Poor kid. The ESP show, held on New Generation Boy, ended in the worst possible way in response to the seismic intensity 5 earthquake. On October 27th, several news stations, including MHK, BTS, and TV Sunset, broadcast breaking news reports. Today TV and Fuji-san TV, meanwhile, began broadcasting simultaneous coverage of both the earthquake and the Esper show starting at 9 p.m. Following this, the two stations were immediately flooded with call after call protesting this decision. When faced with the disappointing end to the show, nearly 5,000 fans that had crowded in front of Shibuya Station all began to boo loudly for over an hour, with some fans even fighting amongst themselves. The situation resulted in 13 separate arrests. And the commotion began with a prank email sent by a boy, hereby referred to as N, living in Shibuya Ward. First, the news stations are skeptical of the email, which claimed that the boy was a clairvoyant expert who could see the culprit behind the New Generation madness, the popular name for the series of brutal incidents taking place in Shibuya. However, the American psychic detective Yuri Brightman, age 43, informed TV Today and Fuji-san TV that he would be willing to become the boy's legal guardian. Both stations immediately took him on his word, or so the story goes. The ratings for both TV Today and Fuji-san TV were extraordinary, the highest simultaneous viewership exceeding 40%. These are astonishing figures, surpassing even those of Kohaku ringing in the new year. Although these figures may only be for simultaneous broadcast with the earthquake report, the broadcast was obviously a huge success in terms of viewership. However, the boy starring in the show, N, did not turn out to be an Esper. He repeatedly riled up the audience by motioning like he was going to jump off the building, but his performance did not extend beyond that. Undeterred, the media companies dared go up to the rooftop to report on the situation and attempted to get a comment about the NewGen incidents, but they were unsuccessful. The boy is found collapsed on the rooftop holding a moe anime figure and costume from a popular Hollywood film. Oh, I clicked. I didn't mean to. According to otaku culture expert... Wait, that's a job? For Professor Hashiba Yoshiro of Meisei University, there have been a rapid increase in the number of young people who dream of becoming heroes, but in the pursuit of this dream act with no regard to the world around them. Under the influence of anime, video games, and other similarly damaging media, they've lost the ability to distinguish between fantasy and reality. This is likely what is causing them to act in such a way that requires psychological care. So that's Chunibyo syndrome. But first of all, an otaku culture expert. How do you get that job? First of all, and second of all, he sounds like he's an anti-otaku culture expert because, like, he's basically doing the classic, video games are corrupting people, violence and all that. Look, okay, first of all, if you ever believe or try or start to think that TV and video games introduce violent thoughts into people's heads and changes their behavior, I'm going to say simply, first of all, sure, exposure to concepts can plant ideas, but acting on those ideas is a whole different ballgame, and it often stems from something deeper than just media you consume. You could take inspiration from things that you see, but violence is something that has always been intrinsic in the thoughts and minds of human beings because it's part of survival of our ancient ancestors. Second of all, you need to remember that back in like the 1600s and beyond, like further back, up until probably the until the early 1900s, watching people being executed was considered a family affair. If there was going to be a public hanging, a drawn and quartering, or some other horrific thing, it was a public event that people were invited to come and bring their children to. Think about that. Obviously, it was meant to be a scare tactic of saying, like, hey, this is what happens when you break the law or do these things, right? But the thing is that willingly people would bring children to these types of events. So you saying that somehow people are more persuaded and more violent because of video games, which are actively, fake simulations telling a story, is more damaging than it would have been for people to bring children to a drawn and quartering? No, clearly not. That's real death that your people are seeing. And somehow humanity managed to survive. I'd argue that it did okay, but of course, things were pretty violent back then too. So, who knows? I'm just saying, it's not like it's new for violence to be forefront in the eyes of children. And you could argue that video games at least give context to it rather than, something that's like an execution. Anyway, I hadn't sent any emails to the media. I'd never even seen Yuri Brightman's show, let alone met him. So what the heck? Was all this just part of Shogun's plan like I'd originally thought? What was his ultimate goal here? He'd said something about it being a quest or something. Okay then, what was the point of having the mass media televise me trying to get my hands on the sword? I didn't get it. Why was Shogun trying to accomplish? Had he even really released Nanami alive? I followed the links to various articles, but even after reading through all of them, not a single one of them mentioned Shogun. There had been practically no gap at all between when I tackled Shogun and when the media had come bursting into the rooftop. Even if Shogun had managed to escape during that window, the media would have seen him. And not only that, but Shogun was supposed to be stuck in a wheelchair. He was supposed to be paralyzed. So what? There was absolutely no way he would have been able to escape the rooftop in such a limited time frame. I went on to check channel. And to no one's surprise, the enormous crap storm was going on. My real name was being plastered everywhere. That sucks. It is I, Anonymous. The uniform is that Nishijo dummy was rocking was from Suimi, isn't it? Are there any Suimi students in this thread right now? The guy is a terminal F-tard. Do us all a favor and off yourself, you piece of human trash, Lamau. Nishijo, you need to chill the fetch out for fetch's sake. It'll be your fault if Otaku start getting beat up again. They found him carrying a figure. Lol, it was the gosh darn Sierra Blood Tune figure, Lamafau. What the fetch? And just like that, otaku freaks around the world all just shed a tear. This Nishijo fetcher should have just stayed inside like the shut-in he is. TV's not for him, lol. Age, stage, so like the name is I Anonymous. I'm guessing it just means like it's an anonymous person because it's different IDs. But like it's just weird. Anyway. Sierra would be like, Nishijo, you big dumb, time for me to kick your fat butt with my awakened form rocket body blow attack. Some rando who was a classmate of his last year already came out and doxed the guy. Everyone was just saying whatever the heck they wanted to. They weren't even considering how I felt as they talked about this crap about me. Having @channel as your enemy was a scary thing. Yeah, I bet. And that was Shogun's fault. I was in this mess. I was wondering if anybody had leaked any sensitive information onto @channel, the stuff that couldn't be aired on TV, but I couldn't find anything that fit that criteria. I hadn't been alone on that rooftop. There'd been one or more person, and yet not a shred of information come out about them. It was almost like their being known as Shogun had never been there in the first place. Maybe the Shogun that appeared on the rooftop was just an illusion. Maybe even if I know for a fact that he exists, there's a possibility that Shogun I saw at O-Front was just a delusion I created. Man, can you imagine living a life where you can't trust anything you see? Yeah, no kidding, man. I think I am too. There were so many things happening that shouldn't have been possible in real life. It was more like a video game at this point. Like there were two worlds, one where Nanami was alive and one where she was dead. And the two options were running parallel to one another, meaning I got to choose between them, just like a choice you find in Naroge. The future was divided into countless different branches. I just started wondering, like, is there a sword here? Like, not the one on the back of his character, but like, that sword we saw before. I need to start paying attention to it. I kind of got distracted. I should have been looking for it earlier, but I was just caught up in the story. But now I want to see, like, am I seeing, like, is there one around here? The future is divided into countless different branches. And what made me different from normal people was that I could simulate what stories, events might occur using my delusions, and I was in the middle of simulating the route that would lead to a bad ending. Like one where Nanami died, or one where Ayase jumped to her death, or one where I fell off O-Front and died. In other words, for some reason, all these things that you'd normally find in the bad ending route could be coming after me, almost like they were hunting me down due to a trap I myself had set. Maybe just had the desire to leave behind my boring, uneventful life to go to a more exciting world, one like one from a game. Because of that, I'd been unconsciously showing myself what that world would look like. That couldn't be it. I didn't have any desire to even remotely like that. Or at the very least, I would never want to make myself go through anything that'd make me feel sad or scared, simulation or not.
どれだけ想像力豊かなんだよ。
What I've been considering was nothing more than some childish bullcrap delusion I'd come up with without thinking. I sighed and leaned back in my chair and looked up at the ceiling with a blank stare on my face. Reality isn't set in stone. Anything and everything just felt fake. The world I was living in was completely hollow. Interesting. NewGen 6th case confirmed. Woman in her 20s found dead in Shibuya River of Shibuyan Ward on October 28th. The woman died of asphyxiation after consuming the flesh of her own right hand and choking on a bone that lodged itself in her throat. Fetch me. That's horrifying.
今日午後8時ごろ、渋谷区の渋谷川で女性の変死体が発見されました。被害者は江戸川区に住む十勝あやみさん27歳で、死因は喉を詰まらせたことによる窒息死とみられています。警察の調べによりますと、被害者の右手の肉が削り取られて骨が露出しており、また胃の中からは人間の肉とみられる内容物が見つかりました。
What the heck?
被害者は自らの右手を噛みちぎって食べたとみられ、また足首が紐で縛られていたとのことです。警察では自殺・他殺の両面から捜査を進めています。
Yeah, no, so that sounds like the hand was real. That's horrifying. Holy crap. Okay. Think we're probably at a good place to stop. Oh, what am I supposed to do with this information? It's like, it's just so much. It's so much. So, we can't know, like, it's like, so we've had stories before where we have a unreliable narrator, and I said before that I get the feeling that that we are in a story with an unreliable narrator, but we're stepping a bit beyond that, and it's like we're living in an unreliable world where we can't tell what's real or not just because the characters' perceptions are off, but the world itself seems to be following its own, like, kind of rules. Like, what was with the whole, like, so the nurse came in, took her temperature, we had a delusion, and then we went back, and then the nurse came in and acted like she'd seen us again for the first time. That implied that we had a delusion of the entire thing, and it was very on track with what was reality. But it's almost like she confronted us with the fact that we'd killed our sister, and then we jumped into a different world where we didn't, like, where Nanami was safe, and instead a different random girl died. And so, like, what is that about? Could these NewGen deaths be things that involved, like, Takumi, and then he kind of deludes himself away, which means that they happen to different people. Like, they still happen, but they happen to different individuals than people whom he knows. And so, like, the NewGen kills are, like, eventually, like, essentially world lines where, like, they're forcibly shifted away from things that would cause him pain. Is that what's supposed to be happening? I don't know. It's so weird. Also, I'm going to take a moment to talk about how, like, the NewGen news bearer, the 1, group dive, 2, the man-child, 3, the crucifixion, 3, the vampire, 5, numbskull, 6, finger food, and then 7 to be continued. So, yeah, that's a lot. Oh, it's so much. Okay, but we'll get to that. There's just a lot happening, and I don't know what's real, and that's the point. Is I think this is supposed to be a story where, like, you don't even know what's real or not. You don't even know what's real or like trustworthy or not. Even Ban, he brings up the whole idea that the footage shows a skyscraper from 2003 that depicts the, like, simultaneous, like, suicides of 5 individuals from a building in 2008 that's confirmed to be accurate. So why was the footage from an older time period involving people from the modern day? Now, I would argue that just saying that it doesn't look doctored doesn't mean it isn't doctored. You can do some pretty impressive stuff with editing, even back in the early 2000s. But it's like, if that is provable, that there are no, like, if there are indications to show it hasn't been doctored, how the fetch does that even happen? It's so weird. I'm really interested. I want to know more, but I feel like it's getting to the point where it's like becoming so insane. I'm starting to wonder if there will be satisfactory answers, or will the answers just be really disappointing? I don't know, but I guess we'll have to find out. Anyway, thank you so much for being here today, especially to the patrons and members for your support. You're lovely people. I don't deserve you. I'm going to do my best to make sure the content continues to flow and that it's consistent. And thank you also to everyone else who's watching for the just being here, for being a part of the channel, for being part of the community, leaving comments and likes and everything. It all makes such a huge difference for me and for a channel like mine. So thank you. It means the world to me. And I look forward to making more content to come. So thank you so much. And until next video watching me, I'll see you next. I'll see you there.